My fiancé's creepy comments toward my 14-year-old sister made me end our engagement. I couldn't ignore the red flags anymore. Protecting my sister is first priority. Hey Reddit. I 27M was engaged to my girlfriend of 3 years, Sarah 26F. Everything seemed perfect, or at least, I thought it was. We had the typical ups and downs, but overall, I truly believed she was my soulmate. That was until a few weeks ago, when she said something that completely changed how I saw her. My younger sister Emily is 14. She's one of the most important people in my life. Emily is shy, kind, and the type of person who lights up a room without even trying. Because of the age gap, I've always been a bit of a protector for her. She's been through her awkward middle school years and is just now starting to gain a little confidence. I've always been proud of how well she handles herself, especially since our family is pretty close-knit. When Sarah and I first got together, she was nothing but kind to Emily. She talked about how sweet Emily was and how much she admired her for being so well behaved. Sarah even took time to help Emily with her homework once when she was visiting my parents' house. Little things like that made me think Sarah truly cared about my family, which was important to me. I always believe that a good partner should fit in seamlessly with the people you care about most. The first red flag appeared during a family barbecue about a month ago. Emily was wearing a simple summer dress, nothing out of the ordinary. Sarah leaned toward me and said, "Your sister is growing up so fast. She's going to be a real heartbreaker one day." At first, I thought it was an innocent comment. Maybe she was just making an observation. But the way she said it felt off. Her tone wasn't joking or lighthearted, it felt almost like admiration, and it made me uncomfortable. I brushed it off, convincing myself I was reading too much into it. Over the next few weeks, though, Sarah's comments about Emily became more frequent. She started asking Emily questions like, "Do you have a boyfriend yet?" or, "Are boys at school starting to notice you?" Emily would just laugh awkwardly and try to change the subject. I noticed that Sarah would sometimes look at Emily in a way that felt strange, like she was sizing her up. It was during a shopping trip with my mom and Emily that things started to escalate. Sarah decided to join us, saying she wanted to help Emily pick out a dress for an upcoming school dance. At the store, Emily found a dress she liked, something modest and age-appropriate. Sarah, however, suggested a dress that was much more fitted and revealing. She said it would make Emily look more mature. Emily looked visibly uncomfortable and told Sarah she didn't like the dress. Sarah laughed and said, "Oh, come on, you'll thank me later when everyone can't take their eyes off you." My mom stepped in at that point and said Emily should choose something she felt comfortable in. Sarah rolled her eyes but didn't push further. That incident really bothered me. I decided to bring it up with Sarah later that night. I told her I didn't like the way she was talking to Emily and that it felt inappropriate. Sarah immediately got defensive. She said I was being too sensitive and that she was just trying to help Emily feel more confident. She even laughed and said, "You're acting like I'm some kind of creep." Her response didn't sit well with me, but I let it go, thinking maybe I was overreacting. Unfortunately, things only got worse. During a dinner party at my parents' house, Emily was sitting across the table from Sarah. At one point, Sarah leaned over to Emily and said, "You have such beautiful features. You should start wearing makeup to bring them out." Emily looked uncomfortable but muttered a polite, "Thank you." I could tell she didn't know how to respond. After dinner, I pulled Emily aside and asked her if everything was okay. That's when she finally opened up to me. She said Sarah's comments made her feel weird and that she didn't like being around her. Emily told me about other things Sarah had said, like suggesting she wear tighter clothes or commenting on how lucky she was to have such a good figure at her age. Hearing this made my blood boil. I confronted Sarah again that night. I told her that her behavior was making Emily uncomfortable and that it needed to stop. Instead of apologizing, Sarah doubled down. She said Emily was being dramatic and that I was blowing things out of proportion. She even accused me of coddling Emily too much and not letting her grow up. That was the moment I realized I couldn't ignore this anymore. Sarah's refusal to take responsibility and her dismissive attitude were huge red flags. I started paying closer attention to how she interacted with Emily and noticed even more troubling behavior. She would find little excuses to be alone with Emily, like offering to help her with her hair or suggesting they watch a movie together while the rest of us were in another room. Emily always seemed tense around her, and it broke my heart to see my sister so uncomfortable in her own home. The final straw came during another family gathering. Emily was sitting on the couch with my mom, and Sarah walked over and sat way too close to her. She put her arm around Emily's shoulder and said, "You're going to have all the boys chasing after you soon. You might even steal some attention at the wedding." Emily froze and looked like she wanted to disappear. My mom shot me a look that said, "Do something." I pulled Sarah aside and told her we needed to leave. On the drive home, I told her that her behavior was completely unacceptable and that I couldn't ignore it any longer. She got angry and started yelling, saying I was making a big deal out of nothing and that my family was turning me against her. When we got home, I told her the engagement was off. She was furious, calling me irrational and accusing me of ruining our relationship over something minor. But to me, this wasn't minor. My sister's safety and well-being come first, and I couldn't marry someone who made her feel unsafe. Breaking off the engagement was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I know it was the right decision. My family has been incredibly supportive, and Emily seems so much more at ease now that Sarah is out of the picture. Looking back, I can't believe I ignored the signs for as long as I did. It's a lesson I'll never forget. When it comes to protecting the people you love, especially someone as vulnerable as a younger sibling, you can't afford to stay silent. Some lines should never be crossed, and Sarah crossed every single one of them. Update. So after I ended things with Sarah, I thought it would be over quickly. I expected her to be upset, of course, but I never imagined how messy it would get. The first few days, she bombarded me with messages and calls, either apologizing or blaming me for what happened. She kept saying that I had misunderstood her intentions and that she never meant to make Emily uncomfortable. I wanted to believe her, but something didn't sit right with me. Then, she started reaching out to mutual friends. She painted a picture of me being paranoid and overprotective, claiming I had blown everything out of proportion. Some friends contacted me to ask what was really going on. I explained everything, how Sarah's comments weren't just an innocent slip of the tongue but part of a troubling pattern. Some of my friends got it, but a few were still skeptical, saying things like maybe you're overreacting or can't you just talk it out with her? They didn't understand how serious the situation was. Meanwhile, Emily seemed to be doing a lot better. I noticed she was more relaxed, more herself. The tension was gone. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted off her shoulders, and she started opening up more. She even told me that she was glad Sarah was no longer around, as she'd always felt uneasy around her. That was an eye-opener for me. One night, Sarah showed up at my apartment, uninvited. She looked distraught and begged me to give her another chance, claiming she would never make those kinds of comments again. Her desperation was unsettling, and it only made me more sure of my decision. I listened, but I didn't cave in. I calmly told her it was over, that there was no going back. Sarah, of course, didn't take that well. She started crying and accusing me of throwing away everything we'd built together. But I couldn't ignore the fact that she had crossed a line with Emily, and that was something I couldn't forgive. I had to ask her to leave, and when she refused, I had to threaten calling the cops to get her to go. Another update. It's been a few weeks since I cut things off with Sarah, and it's safe to say things have only gotten messier. Sarah has been spinning her own narrative, telling people I dumped her because I was jealous and protective. She told anyone who would listen that I was too controlling and that I was unfairly turning my family against her. I started hearing about this from some of our mutual friends, and it really bothered me. She was spreading lies, trying to make herself the victim, while completely disregarding how uncomfortable her behavior had made Emily. One friend reached out to me, asking if there was any truth to what Sarah was saying. I told them everything, explaining how Sarah had been making inappropriate comments to Emily for months. I mentioned that Emily had confided in me about feeling uncomfortable around her, and that was why I had to end the engagement. It didn't stop there, though. Sarah actually reached out to my mom, telling her she wanted to apologize and hoped that they could fix things. My mom wasn't having it. She shut Sarah down and told her to stay away from our family. Sarah didn't take kindly to that, accusing my mom of turning me against her. It was clear to me that Sarah was so desperate to control the narrative, but I wasn't going to let that happen. I spoke to Emily again to make sure she was doing okay. She told me she felt relieved that Sarah was no longer in the picture. I reassured her that she did the right thing by speaking up, and she seemed to understand that this wasn't just about me being overprotective, this was about Sarah's behavior being unacceptable. At this point, I had to block Sarah on everything. It seemed like she wasn't getting the message. She kept sending texts, leaving voice messages, and trying to contact people in my life to ask them to convince me to get back together. But I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into going back to someone who had made my sister feel unsafe. Final update. It's been over a month since I ended things with Sarah, and I can confidently say that I'm moving forward. Cutting her out completely was honestly the best thing I could have done for both Emily and me. After weeks of trying to get back into my life, it seems like Sarah has finally realized I'm not changing my mind. I've been focusing on my relationship with Emily. It's been amazing to see how much more relaxed and happy she's been without the constant tension. She's started doing things she loves again, spending time with her friends, getting involved in school activities, and just feeling free. It's been a relief to see her so much more comfortable in her own skin. I know I made the right decision for her. My parents have been incredibly supportive throughout this whole process. They've reassured me that I did the right thing. My mom even told me that she had a feeling something was off with Sarah, but she didn't want to step in unless it became a bigger issue. My dad, usually quiet about these things, took me aside and said he was proud of how I handled everything. That meant a lot. As for me, I've been spending time reflecting on everything. I've gone to therapy to work through the emotions I've been holding on to. Ending a relationship, especially one that you thought was going to lead to marriage, is never easy. But I'm learning to trust my instincts more. This experience has made me realize how important it is to listen to my gut, especially when it comes to protecting my family. I'm also learning not to ignore red flags in the future. Looking back, there were little signs that I ignored because I wanted to believe Sarah was a good person. I've learned my lesson. I'm sharing this final update to close this chapter. I want to remind anyone who's going through something similar that it's okay to protect the people you love, even if it means making tough decisions. Trust your instincts, and don't let anyone manipulate you into thinking you're overreacting when you're just standing up for what's right. Now, I'm focused on being the best brother I can be. Emily deserves to feel safe, loved, and respected in her own home. I'll continue to support her, and I'll always protect my family above everything else. As for Sarah, I hope she learns from this experience, but at the end of the day, that's not my concern anymore. My priority is my family, and I'll never back down from that.